Now, we see Selbia's mountain forest, with Estio's father breathing heavily and climbing up the mountain. Suddenly, a black bird attacked and knocked him down. Realizing he had taken the wrong path, he saw a bright light in the distance and ran toward it, begging it to save him. As he got closer, he noticed a huge hole in the ground with a shiny object in the middle. Thinking it was a large piece of gold, he went down and tried to lift it. Unfortunately, there was something else in the big hole. A big black wolf covered in blood caused Estio to panic. But then, he thought about his family and how his life would change if he brought the chunk of gold home. He grabbed an axe and killed the wolf on the spot. Happily, he took the shiny thing and rushed home. Estio's father knocked on the door, and his wife, holding their baby Rosette, opened it. He entered the house and quickly told her to pack their bags because they needed to leave the village. She asked for an explanation, so he showed her the precious gem he had found, which he believed was gold. She was confused and looked at the contents, questioning his sanity. He then noticed a small baby boy in the wooden trunk, smiling happily. He fell to the floor in disbelief and tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding, repeating his earlier words about the gem. Angered, his wife then told him to stop talking. The next day, Estio's father and mother took a walk with baby Estio. His father wondered if the baby had been possessed by a ghost because what he had brought home had originally been a chunk of gold. His wife, walking behind him, angrily told him to return the baby to where he found it. The father considered the possibility that the beast he had killed might have been a human since the chunk of gold had transformed into a human baby, making anything seem possible. They walked to the place and stopped beside a tree, looking at the enormous hole, which resembled a meteor crater. They saw some priests talking, and other people from nearby villages were also there, curious about the hole's origin. The father tried to act as if he was seeing it for the first time, and some people in the crowd started discussing the person in the hole, believing them to be a high priest who had come from the holy palace. Someone mentioned that they might have received a revelation or something important. Another person said that, from what he heard, the expected thing wasn't there. Estio's father asked what was going on, and the person pointed at the high priest, explaining that he had come from the holy palace. Estio's father was shocked upon hearing this and understood the seriousness of the situation. He asked why they had come, and the person revealed that they claimed a dragon's treasure had fallen from the sky. Estio's mother was initially surprised and then frightened when she heard the men talking about dragons being connected to immortal beings. The person continued, saying that since a revelation had come from those who had hidden for centuries, the holy place was likely in chaos. He added that a wicked person had killed the dragon's guardian and stolen the treasure, suggesting that this person deserved severe punishment, even execution, for taking a dragon's treasure. People in the area knew that the imperial family would likely handle the situation before the dragon became enraged, and the thieves wouldn't survive it. Estio's father and mother hurried back home, wondering what to do. When they entered the house, their other son, Teriot, asked if they had bought something tasty at the market. His parents exchanged glances, made up a story, and introduced Teriot to his younger brother, whom they named Estio. Memories from the past began to fade, and they returned to the present. Teriot was puzzled and asked his parents about the strange occurrence. His father apologized to Estio, explaining that he didn't know what Estio was, but he couldn't let his family face execution. He expressed that he didn't blame Estio and wanted to protect everyone, as a father should. He noted that the more Estio was seen outside, the more dangerous it became for everyone. Estio, seemingly uninterested, looked down at his father and expressed a desire to protect him too. He mentioned his intention to treat him as his own child, give him a name, and watch him grow like other kids. Estio's yellow eyes transformed into a blue color. He imitated how humans spoke and felt, and he even grew at the same rate as humans. But his growth started to slow down when they banished him to the attic, where they treated him terribly. Despite their harsh treatment, Estio kept acting like everything was normal. He never complained about his life in that freezing attic, even when he had no food. This scared them. His father even bowed down on all fours and asked for forgiveness. He explained that a guardian cannot leave their master, and that they cannot exist independently. Estio also mentioned that the only thing he had learned was the truth of his birth. Mubian thought about Estio's lifespan, considering him still like a dragon hatchling. Dragon infancy can last at least 100 years and up to 500 years after hatching. During this time, dragons are cared for by their mother, and only after that do they grow into adults. Mubian then asked if Estio intended to continue with guild work, and Estio confirmed that he did plan to. Mubian nervously mentioned that he was thinking of giving up his other positions, but Estio said there was no need for that. So, Parker decided they should grab a meal before meeting with their fans. However, just as Parker suggested this, Lena suddenly appeared behind him and began talking. Parker was surprised and asked if they had met before. Parker had thought it was a good idea to approach Estio on his own and tell him about Lena's desire to meet him. He glanced at Estio and felt like he wanted some alone time but couldn't express it, given Estio's blank expression. Parker ate a piece of bread and then asked Estio in a foreign language what he planned to do after returning to headquarters. Estio's response surprised Parker because he thought Estio would do something else, especially after learning about his origin and past. While they were sitting at their table, they noticed a girl with a hood over her head. She asked Estio about the age of a cactus, but he hadn't asked it yet. She mentioned that he could know without asking, but Estio was more concerned about his inability to read her emotions. Estio woke up briefly and pulled Suki closer. She reassured him, telling him that it wouldn't change anything, no matter what he was. Then, they both closed their eyes and fell asleep. The next morning, Estio woke up with Suki in her bed, and Niju and Ahuru were sleeping on the floor. As he started wondering if he had slept for a whole day, Parker arrived at the door. Estio asked the mysterious girl who she was, and Lena explained that she was not a human but a doll named Jen, created by the Guild Master. Parker explained further about the Guild Master of Ignis being the only puppet master in the world. The weather was still bad, with heavy rain, and they talked about their plans to travel to Galatia. They estimated it would take about 2 days on foot because the carriages couldn't move due to the rain. He mentioned that he was just about to wake Estio up. However, before he could tell Estio to go down and eat, Mubian interrupted him, making Parker angry. If they couldn't answer, they had to run laps until they were sweating. Since Estio didn't have a rookie period, Lena said she'd guide and give him the best tour. Estio then agreed and got dragged away by Lena and Parker. As they continued walking, Jen smiled as the others suddenly spoke that Estio was a kind leader. Parker said he had gone through that as well. Lena explained that usually, they sent rookies on a patrol around the headquarters so they understood its layout. Then they were randomly asked about the city, like the biggest sculpture in the plaza or the most famous candy store. After a long and tiring walk, they eventually made it back to the Ignis Guild House. Estio immediately fell asleep, and Suki was relieved that he did because his thoughts were quite jumbled. However, becoming a guardian by drinking dragon blood had a cost. Their will and soul were subjugated, and they had to obey their master's commands. Their master's safety became their highest priority. It was a blood contract. As he observed Jen closely, Estio thought that apart from his inability to read her emotions, she looked just like any living person. Lena informed him that there was a tattoo below her eye that marked her as a doll made by the master, making it easy to distinguish her from a human. Estio agreed and said it was fair. He asked Mubian if the request was completed, and Mubian said it was, still kneeling. Then Mubian surprised Estio by saying he'd protect him. Estio showed surprise on his face, and Mubian continued, explaining that their family, the Hygar, had a history of dragon blood. He, Mubian, had received a calling from the immortals to be a rescuer so that tragedies like what happened to Estio wouldn't occur again. He asked Estio to choose him as his guardian, and Estio silently accepted. She reassured Estio that there was no need to treat her like a human because a doll could only obey the commands of its master and couldn't feel pain. He wondered what the wolf's name was. Mubian kneeled, and after Estio asked if he knew about all this, Nubian admitted he had some idea but never expected his family to be so cruel. Estio asked if he resented him, and Nubian replied that it wasn't necessary. While everyone began eating, Parker asked Estio why he hadn't started eating yet. Parker suggested that Estio might not eat raw food, and they should have asked before ordering. Lena freaked out, fearing she had made a big mistake. The food arrived, and everyone was excited, but they couldn't stop thinking about the living doll displayed on the table. Niju was delighted by the sight of the plates. No one said a word as they took a walk in the rainy mountains. They arrived at the place where Estio was originally found, but now it was just a pond. Estio came there to mourn his guardian wolf, which his fake father had killed many years ago. Both of them felt uncomfortable and disappointed in themselves. On the other side, Niju was feeling full and Estio asked if she could even walk. Someone suggested they take a walk in the city because their leader, Estio, had been stuck inside and hadn't gone out much. Parker told him that he had been in a daze every day since the last request when he found out about his past. Lena hugged Estio and pointed down the road, telling everyone to start walking. She explained that their guild had a custom of welcoming newcomers. But all he could manage was a feeble apology, claiming it was to protect his real family. This deeply hurt Estio. He hit the wall in frustration, shattering the glass into pieces. His grandpa muttered the word, "dragon," and a dark aura enveloped Estio. This made him see the dishes as a bundle of grudges, and he chose not to discuss it, simply stating that he wasn't hungry. After they left the restaurant, Parker got really upset with Lena. He said they should have taken better care of their leader. Suki followed him calmly, and so did Niju, Parker, and Nubian. Nubian seemed a bit sad, showing concern for Estio. Terriot was shocked and started apologizing and begging for mercy, just like his mother did. Estio was disgusted by their behavior, and realized they were actually weak people. He turned to the door and left the house. However, Estio clarified that it wasn't the rawness of the food, he simply didn't like the taste. Estio felt uncomfortable looking at the raw food, realizing that the creatures had been sliced up while still alive just moments ago. With a blanket, he could even open the window slightly to let in some cool air. He could relax, eat chocolate, take a nap, and wake up for more chocolate. In essence, he was told to be lazy and wait for the guild master. Lena took Estio to the finest restaurant in Castle Revito. She called the waitress and ordered for Estio as well. However, Estio noticed that Ahura was unusually quiet that day, wondering if something had hurt him. They were shaking in fear, but Estio turned his back and said his goodbyes as he walked away. Lena called after him and bowed down, apologizing for speaking rudely about Niju. She promised not to call Niju a white fur anymore. Lena then looked at Estio and smiled, asking if she could take him to the best restaurant and buy him a meal as a token of her apology. As Nubian tried to convince Estio to let him stay, Estio promised to call him later. Fast forward, Estio arrived at the guild headquarters and was told to take a break. The guild master would look for him later. He was given a red blanket and instructed to read a book while lying in a warm room. Impressed by Estio's skills, Lena noticed the badge on his clothes, signifying that he was a guild leader as well. Parker advised Lena to show more respect to Estio, considering the significant difference in their ranks. Estio replied mysteriously, suggesting that he might not be the person Nubian thought he was. He added that he didn't want to confirm the truth of everything that had happened. Estio then told Nubian to go back to Haiga without him. Nubian felt disappointed, thinking he had finally found the last trace of the dragon, a master he had desperately sought. But now, it seemed that everything he had done so far had been in vain. He wondered if his Haiga family was useless after all. Estio interrupted his thoughts and assured him that he would call for him in the future. Realizing she had been too direct in her approach to the guild leader, Lena scratched her head. Estio then stood up and instructed Parker to have a meal with his friend, while he and Lena continued their conversation. Later that day, Estio announced that their quest had been completed, and they should return to Galasia. Nubian asked why Estio insisted on staying at the guild, suggesting they move to Higar, a safer territory. Lena had vivid flashbacks of the two of them sitting in a carriage and chatting. Estio recognized Lena too, and she was delighted that he wasn't devoured by the white fur monster, which had disappeared without a trace. Ahura disagreed and wanted to return to make some changes in Estio's family. Estio appreciated Ahura's concern but stated that Selbia was the way it was, and there was no need to change anything. As Estio strolled down the hallway, Nija asked if he was really okay with not learning more about his Rio family. Estio replied that it was fine. Lena moved closer to Estio and suggested that maybe they had crossed paths. But upon looking at him more closely, she realized they hadn't met. She recognized Estio and called him by that name. He then glanced at Estio and thought that, by the leader's standards, Estio wasn't any different from a newborn. Additionally, he may have appeared young, but that was just a disguise he used to stay safe. He wondered why the black dragon hadn't protected his own blood. What if it wasn't because he didn't want to protect him but because he couldn't? The next day, Estio woke up in his beautiful room and thought about how he had never learned to play. He opened the window and admired the view of the sky, mountains, and buildings. At that time, she had scoured the entire mountain searching for him, believing he was eaten by the white fur. As Lena continued speaking, Nija playfully peeked out from behind a bench. Lena, startled and terrified, drew her swords to defend herself, but Parker assured her that Niju was Estio's trusted companion. Lena was astonished by Estio's ability to calm such a wild beast with his mind-reading and mind-controlling skills. He went outside, sat on a bench to soak up the sun, and noticed Parker and a person with orange hair in the distance. To his surprise, that person turned out to be Lena, Estio's good old friend. She thought he was being too harsh in front of the leader, not knowing who she was referring to. Uncle Bryn then turned to Estio and inquired if he was the guild leader recently promoted. Estio remained silent, but the man introduced himself as Bryn Yeager, responsible for taking care of the botanical garden. Our protagonist humbly introduced himself. As Uncle Bryn held Estio's hand, he privately marveled at finally meeting an ability user who could read hearts. He wanted to ask Estio what his plants were thinking, but after reading his thoughts, Estio felt uncomfortable because that was precisely what he didn't want to do. Lena apologized to the kind director Bryn. When he recognized her, he asked if she used to be a wandering mercenary because she wasn't well known at that time. Lena, visibly angry, scolded her Uncle Bryn and informed him that she was already famous as the leader of the combat department, receiving requests and all. The countdown on the paper was initiated by Magic Ink. Lena pointed out that reaching the central market in Castle Revito was challenging because it was massive, with 8 major roads leading in different directions, complicated alleyways, and a sea of people. Estio opened the scroll, which instructed him to go to Castle Revito in the central market and find Master Kai within 30 minutes. The reward would be given upon finding her, and the instructions would self-destruct after the time limit, so he needed to hurry. Niju clumsily moved away and apologized, but the man just stood there, watching the flower's life fade away, and then he started crying because of the damage to his beloved plant. Although it was a bit late, he wanted to express his gratitude. She was glad and pointed out that the Ignis Guild had earned a lot of trust from him. Estio then insisted that he was also a member of the guild. She admitted her mistake and thanked him for opening her eyes. He explained that trying to understand the thoughts of an unwilling being felt like a form of violence or abuse. This brought back some painful memories of past encounters with his family members. Jen told him that trees couldn't communicate unless he listened to them, even if they wanted to share something or had a story to tell. She described trees as unable to express themselves, even in times of drought and decay. Estio inquired why she had promoted him to the position of guild leader. She replied that it was for the same reason she had come to meet him, but it might not be suitable for others to overhear. Parker apologized on behalf of Lena, who stood there in disbelief as the man used her name for the apology. The man then angrily clarified that he wasn't upset about the tree. Instead, he pointed at Niju, who had accidentally stepped on a flower. She added that, for the trees, Estio's presence was a blessing. As they shared this wholesome moment, a man who was in charge of the garden came and yelled at them, asking what they were doing there. Estio wondered how these animals, which clearly came from different environments, had all ended up in the same place. As he pondered this, he suddenly heard a voice saying hello. When he turned to see who it was, he spotted a creature that looked like a raccoon. Despite not wanting to disturb him, Suki knew it could be dangerous if he kept sleeping for a long time. Suddenly, Estio woke up and reassured Suki that he was fine and there was no need to worry. Back in the guild house, Niju sat beside Estio's bed, contemplating whether to wake him up. Suki jumped on the bed and calmly watched him, then turned to Nijus, signaling that they shouldn't wake him up just yet. Estio had understood, and then she said they would meet again the next day before leaving. After they finished their meal, Estio, Suki, Niju, and Ahuru went for a walk. During their stroll, they encountered monkeys, ducks, rabbits, horses, and various other animals. The animal took offense and said he wasn't a raccoon but a red panda. Estio apologized, and the red panda introduced himself as Ban. Estio wasn't sure if Ban was part of the Ignis Guild. Ban looked different from the animals in Estio's village. Ban happily introduced Estio to the other animals, welcoming him like family. Estio was surprised by Ban's friendly behavior and asked if he was afraid of humans. Ban reassured him, saying that everyone in the Ignis Guild was kind to animals, providing them with food, teaching them, and even cleaning up after them. They played with the animals every day, so they loved humans. She replied that she was made of trees, which made Estio realize that she didn't have the same ability as him. She suggested that Estio listen to the trees, but he refused, fearing they might not want him to read their thoughts. She mentioned a remarkable warrior in the city known as the Claws of Ignis, due to his outstanding combat skills. She praised him and revealed her intention to meet him to learn from him. Estio wished her luck, and she blushed. During their walk, they unexpectedly ran into Lena, who hugged Estio and inquired if he was angry. Estio denied it but seemed annoyed. Lena then explained the location of the training grounds and discussed the weapons used for fighting. They could now hear the thoughts of the tree, saying it was nice to see the last child of the Black Kin and that they were relieved he was alive. Estio asked Jen if she could also hear the sounds of the plants. Kai responded that she also had incorrect information, as living a long life meant she had experienced more but didn't guarantee she was always right. Kai then forcefully stuck her fork into a piece of bread and stated with a menacing expression that she was sure the yellow dragon Shuanan was an enemy. That night, Estio spoke with Ahuru, saying that all the animals in the city were cute. Ahuru agreed and expressed a desire to meet them again. Estio suggested they take some rest before accepting any requests. Estio felt tense in the presence of this unknown person. The person pointed at Niju and claimed that there was another dirty one. The next morning, as Estio opened the window, the birds warned him of impending rain, for which he thanked them. Niju suggested they have breakfast and visit the animal friends they met the previous day. However, she quickly shifted to a more innocent tone and mentioned that she would be joining the leader support team starting tomorrow. Estio inquired if she meant the one with Parker in it, and she confirmed that he was right, but she wouldn't be a member of the support team as the master, but rather as Kai. They decided to communicate telepathically. The once blue sky behind Estio darkened, and everything around them turned pitch black. She explained that the guild was created to assist and protect members with special abilities. They sat and began eating. Kai referred to Suki as a black tiger and told her to eat as much as she wanted. However, Suki just gave her a resentful look. Estio was lost in thought, considering how Kai seemed to know Shuanan, and he wondered if the name had a special meaning. Lena then touched a tree and asked if it had something to say. After gazing at it for a moment, Estio replied that he didn't want to listen to it. Lena wondered why and thought to herself that she would be very curious and would try to understand everything if she had that ability. As they were about to part ways, Lena warned Estio not to follow the path he intended, as she claimed to smell blood at its end. Nija added that it wasn't human blood but the blood of the animals they had met the day before. Suddenly, they felt a looming threat approaching them, something with a murderous intent. Out of nowhere, a person in a black cloak appeared before them. Lena asked if there was a monster inside the guild headquarters, or if she was so hungry she'd become a monster herself. Estio called Kai, Master Kai, but she advised him not to address her in that way because she preferred to keep her position a secret. When Estio asked how she acquired her knowledge about dragons, she mentioned that he seemed oblivious to his own problems. Suddenly, Jen said something, and everyone turned to her to see what was happening. They saw Jen, the doll, with her head up, looking at the trees and saying that the tree was welcoming them all. The role of guild leader was established with the sole purpose of protecting Estio. The reason was that, for a long time, they had known about someone with the same ability as his. A very long time ago, it was believed that all the dragons had left the world, but there were two that hadn't. Lena had asked Estio about his ability to understand the feelings of animals. Estio explained that he couldn't hear them all the time. Instead, he needed to look at the creature to connect with it in some way. Later, Suki pushed away a plate of fish and ran from it because she didn't like it. Kai commented that she had heard that cats liked fish, but Niju corrected her, explaining that it was just a stereotype. Estio was shocked upon hearing the story about the yellow dragon because he knew he was a descendant of the black dragon. She warned him to avoid Shuvanan and explained that he must never be curious about him or attempt to find him. Estio asked who they were, and she revealed that one had already passed away. The other dragon, who had remained in the world to the end, was the yellow dragon Shuvanan. He was considered the last dragon. The botanical garden looked beautiful, and they walked in it. Lena explained that the botanical garden was like a city garden where anyone could come and see the flowers and trees. Parker wondered if all the plants could talk like a huru, and Estios said he didn't know. She explained that her knowledge had accumulated naturally over her long life, but it wasn't always accurate. She acknowledged that living a long life meant she had experienced more, but it didn't guarantee that her information about anything or anyone was always correct. Someone knocked on the door, and Kai appeared, mentioning that she had a request. She took one look at Estio and, realizing he looked ill, decided to put the request back in her pocket. They all started walking down the hallway, and Estio explained that he was on his way to the cafeteria. She extended her hand and said that for those reasons she, Kai, would be with him from that moment on. Estio clenched his fist, holding the scroll, and asked if he was even worth it. He mentioned that he didn't even know what kind of person he was, and questioned why the master of the guild would go to such lengths for him. Kai told him it seemed like he didn't realize his true value yet, and she smiled as if she truly meant it. After their conversation, Kai told him to go back and rest, promising to visit him again soon. Kai commented that everyone was staring at her in the cafeteria for some reason, and Ahura suggested that her clothes were too formal. He added that since she was a child, wearing such clothes would naturally attract attention because people are curious about unusual things. They continued the tour and arrived at the famous midday sunshine street. Lena explained that the sun moved directly in line with the street, giving it its name. She suggested taking a carriage to explore, but Estio refused and asked if there was a medical center for plant health. It now seemed like his adoptive parents had unknowingly protected him by keeping him hidden in the attic, even though they might have had their own motives. Luckily, Shuanan doesn't live in the Ruberazan Empire, and because it's impossible to hide Estio forever, she decided that it would be better to let people know that he was receiving special protection within the Empire. Regardless, Estio asked her to lead him there, and Lena happily accepted, telling him to trust her. Lena was in high spirits, and Parker commented that she was like a pony without any reins. Estio didn't mind Lena's behavior, as he was solely concerned about Ahura's health. Estio grabbed his coat, and when Ahura asked where he was headed since it was already evening, he tried to say he was going to get some food. However, Suki realized that he was actually unwell and had a fever. His blush wasn't from embarrassment. He was worried about Ahura's health the whole time. Lena thought for a moment and mentioned a botanical garden, but she warned that the director there was always super busy, so it might not be a great idea. As Estio apologized, Nijis and Suki immediately hugged and snuggled him, relieved that he had woken up and wasn't actually sick. Ahura began cracking jokes and said he thought Estio was in hibernation. Estio blushed and insisted that he was okay. The reason was that Shuhanan didn't know of his existence yet, and if he found out that another black dragon was alive in the world, he would likely try to kill it. Estio was left speechless, unaware of the danger he was in. Uncle Bryn inquired about Ahura's age, and Ahura blushed, revealing that he was 200 years old, much older than Parker initially believed. Ahura explained that he was even older within his tribe, which finally helped Uncle Bryn understand the situation. A moment later, we saw Jen running and calling her master. Jen was happy, and everyone was surprised to see her smile. She hugged her master, and Estio just stood there. He introduced himself, mentioning that when he had been wandering around after leaving his hometown with nowhere to go, the guild's acceptance had been a great help. Suddenly, a pair of hands reached out to him, and a white-haired lady appeared, telling him to accept the reward for finding her. She looked him in the eyes and revealed herself as Kai, the guild master of Ignis. Ahura agreed to show Bryn his roots, but only under the pot. Bryn examined the roots and determined that Ahura was very healthy. Ahura added that he was indeed very healthy but just a little sleepy. Niju panicked, asking if he was okay, and Estio assured her he was fine before running off again, with his friends telling him to slow down. Estio reached one of the market stands, where he was welcomed by a blonde, blue-eyed lady. Uncle Bryn was shocked and couldn't understand why he was being called a pervert. After a moment's reflection, he realized that the cactus had spoken to him, which made him even more agitated. Ahura got really angry and turned red, but Estio calmed him down, patted him, and explained that his condition appeared slightly different than usual, which was why Uncle Bryn recommended a thorough checkup. Estio clarified that Bryn Yeager was a plant doctor. She asked if he was looking for a gift or something for himself. Estio noticed the markings on her cheeks and realized she was just a puppet. He explained he had come to meet Master Kai, but the puppet only smiled and didn't respond. Parker asked if its condition was good, to which Uncle Bryn replied negatively. He then turned to Estio and asked if he could inspect Ahura's roots. Just as he mentioned it, Ahura spoke to Bryn, complaining and calling him a pervert. He turned around and told Uncle Bryn that the plants in the garden were thankful to him. Uncle Bryn was happily surprised to hear the news. Estio explained that all the trees and flowers wanted to thank him, even the one Niju had accidentally stepped on. Bryn stood there with a smile, and Estio said his goodbyes. Estio said he would leave Ahura with Bryn, but Ahura immediately refused, stating he didn't want to sleep and, to be more precise, he'd never sleep because he worried about Estio. Uncle Bryn warned that consistently refusing to sleep could lead to health problems and explained that although plants may seem simple, they are as delicate and unique as animals. He turned to Estio and excitedly explained that Ahura used to be a rare plant, believed to have vanished a long time ago. It's a large, beautiful desert flower that's said to live for over 1,000 years and then produce fairy-like fruit. Ahura disagreed, mentioning that they weren't extinct since his parents were still alive in his hometown. Uncle Bryn told Ahura that the drowsiness he was experiencing was part of the plant's growth process, and promised to research how long the sleepy periods would last. Parker had mentioned that they didn't even know what the master looked like. Lena added that the master usually communicated through puppets. While Parker continued talking, Estio suddenly started running and said he was going to the central market. An hour later, Uncle Bryn examined Ahura with a magnifier. Bryn observed that the cactus had been well taken care of, wasn't thirsty, and had no nutrient deficiencies. However, he noted that from the outside, it appeared to lack strength. Factors like living environment, size, age, and even leaf shape distinguished them. He then provided Estio with nutrients and soil for Ahura and gave him a bottle containing a scroll with instructions from the guild master. At the crowded market, Estio's friends caught up with him. He was worried about not being able to identify Guild Master Kai among so many people. He decided to break his own rule and read people's hearts to find the Guild Master's whereabouts. As he unleashed his mind-reading ability, a dark aura spread around him. He listened to people, but all he heard was random chatter about the weather and market prices. After a few seconds, he located Kai's location but overused his power, causing a nosebleed. Estio suspected Bryn knew he was coming, but Bryn revealed he was only notified shortly before Estio's arrival. He informed Estio that the guild master regularly monitored all guild members. She had control over more than 1,000 puppets, which could break down easily, making her craft many. Niju was confused and scared when a person pulled out a knife, claiming Niju was just another non-human being, an impure life form. The person ran toward Niju, but when she got close, she stopped with her knives in front of Niju's face. Niju asked why she was swinging her knives for no reason, and the person questioned if Niju was a monster or simply a very hairy human, all the while continuing to swing the sword. Estio grabbed one of the knives and asserted that whether Niju was human or not, it didn't really matter. Estio, revealing the person's full name as Yun Buram, shocked Yun, who asked how Estio knew her name and if he was a new mental type ability user. Estio inquired why Yun was trying to harm Niju, and Yun replied that monsters are bugs that need to be eradicated. Estio argued that Niju wasn't a monster, but Yun insisted she wasn't human either. They stood in silence for a couple of seconds. Yun then warned that a monster like Niju could rip Estio apart with sharp teeth and claws whenever it wanted. Unlike with people, there was no way to communicate with lower life forms, she added. Yun had mentioned earlier that if she couldn't communicate with Niju, she shouldn't trust her. Estio then questioned if that was why she had killed the animals a few minutes ago. Yun explained that the master had instructed her not to harm people recklessly, implying it didn't matter if they were not human. Now, Kai arrived and clarified that it was definitely not what Yun had interpreted. Yun happily greeted Kai, but Kai advised her not to unnecessarily end the lives of others. Kai emphasized that the animals Yun had killed were essential to the guild and its allies. In response, Yun started yelling and complaining. Kai ordered Yun to watch her tone, return to her place, and stop causing harm to the guild during her stay. Despite clenching her teeth, Yun walked away. A minute later, they reached the site of the massacre. Animals lay all over the place, covered in blood and lifeless. The red panda was also among the casualties, and not a single living animal could be seen. Estio's face reflected deep sadness, and he remained silent. Kai had apologized to Estio, expressing that Yun was not a bad child. However, Estio countered, mentioning that those who deserved apologies were no longer alive simply because they were different from humans. This made Estio recall the animals he had encountered the previous day. They had joyfully expressed their love for humans. Estio, now somber, questioned Kai. He asked whether, if a relentlessly powerful being appeared and harmed humans without hesitation, would she still consider it a simple matter after witnessing the suffering of the victims? In response, Estio picked up the red panda and moved a short distance away. He began digging the ground with his hands. Soon, Lena and Niju joined him, declaring their intent to help. Later, they stood before the animal graves, each adorned with a flower. A few days later, Kai and Estio met up at a cafe. Niju, who wasn't used to being away from Estio, waited for him outside. Estio received a request from Marissa of Ruberizen Arcania during their meeting. She was the first imperial princess of the Ruberizen Empire, the emperor's first daughter, and she's turning 21 this year. Marissa, a tombish princess, had turned down all marriage proposals and was known for making sometimes unreasonable requests. Kai explained the situation, and Estio wondered if he could decline a request from the imperial family. Kai smiled and suggested he go to the location with a warrior since the original plan involved Yun. Kai, pointing at herself, the doll she used to communicate with Estio, expressed her intention to accompany him. However, she clarified that the doll couldn't really fight. To help him, Kai handed Estio some files and the authority to choose his own combat member. Estio took the files and started reading them. He inquired about why a combat member was necessary for the request. Kai explained that despite Ellie being a peaceful city, the guild policy mandated team requests to have both support and combat members. Being an executive, he couldn't be sent without guards. Estio questioned the need for extra protection, and Kai clarified that facing someone as formidable as Yun could be challenging, even for Niju, who is strong. Estio examined the files silently and inquired if the combat member could be selected from within the guild's ranks. Kai confirmed it could be anyone, even outside the guild. Estio decided the next day. The following day, Estio appeared with his combat partner, Parker the Avian. Predictably, Parker felt nauseous after using the portal. Estio asked if there was a direct portal to the capital, but Kai explained the Emperor's caution prevented one due to the numerous enemies the Imperial family faced. The Emperor never wanted a guild of people with abilities to easily enter the capital, so she insisted that, despite being tiring, they had to walk there. Eventually, they reached a beautiful ranger village and received a warm welcome. The children, especially, were surprised because they greatly admired Ignis Guild members. One child mentioned that members of another guild, the Ballista Guild, had arrived the night before. When the boys debated which guild was stronger, they unanimously agreed that Ignis was the biggest and strongest. Niju, noticing the children talking, wondered what was happening. The kids explained that Ignis was the most significant and powerful guild, even supported by the Emperor. A red-haired boy named Rian asked his friends if Ignis Guild members would help them. They said Ignis was the best but mentioned that requesting help might require payment. Rian claimed to have money. One of the kids then grabbed Rian's hand and encouraged him to ask for assistance. Shortly after, Estio found himself in a room with Parker, who was still feeling unwell from the portal. Estio instructed Kai to take care of Parker while he stepped outside for a moment. Kai cautioned him to be cautious since he no longer had a combat member. However, Niju quickly volunteered to replace Parker. As Estio pondered how only he could appoint a duke like Mubian as his guard, he glanced out the window, hoping Mubian would arrive soon. Suki then alerted Estio that someone was following him. Estio acknowledged knowing but was surprised when Suki revealed it wasn't the kids but rather the guests staying in the same inn as Parker. Estio, not putting much effort into being observant, claimed that strong thoughts naturally came to him, even if he didn't actively focus on them. The followers approached, questioning why he was mumbling to himself or if he had the ability to talk to cats. Suki dismissed the guy as an idiot for not recognizing Estio's rank. They insulted him, claiming he forgot his weapon. One person insisted it was a basic mistake for a complete beginner. Estio asked about their identity, and they all shouted at once, saying they were from Ballista. Despite seeing their guild mark, Estio was clueless. While they continued bragging, Niju grew larger. One of them, observing Niju, commented that Estio had tamed a fierce beast. Estio had to clarify again that Niju isn't a monster. Trying to smooth things over, one of the guys mentioned they were just trying to know him better since they all work in the same industry. Estio wondered if their guild had some issue with Ignis. One of the men shouted, demanding why Estio wasn't answering, and questioned if he was implying he didn't want to talk to a lower-ranked guild like theirs. Estio didn't really care, so he decided not to approach them. He told them he couldn't stay for long, and asked them to get to the point. The smartest person in the group, who also talked a lot, told Estio that it seemed like he was just a low-ranking member, stuck with a mission to guard a kid without a proper team. Now that they knew they were talking about Kai as the kid, Estio and Suki just observed the misunderstandings piling up. One of them asked Sir Estio when he started working. Estio mentioned he joined the guild at the beginning of the year. Another guy said he remembered seeing Estio with a new member and then tried to attack. Niju stopped him by grabbing his hand. The guy looked at Estio and realized he didn't even flinch. Just a second later, Suki, now in the form of a black tiger, leaped at the Ballista men to defend Estio. She had dashed towards them at full speed, and blood had splashed. Now Suki was on top of a guy, threatening to kill him. Estio told her to stop because they weren't trying to hurt them for real. Estio then addressed Jose Mark, the team leader of the special request team, by his name, asking if he was right. Josemark, wounded and surprised, wondered how Estio knew about him. His teammates, scared, asked how dare Suki attack the leader. Now, we see the children who wanted to pay Estio for help sitting on the tree branches, yelling at them to stop fighting because it's forbidden in Ranger Village. Rian then said he would report them if they caused any trouble. Josemark mentioned that they were the ones who got hurt, and told the kid it would be better for him to leave his guild as soon as he could. As they were walking away, Josemark said that the guild master of Ignis was not a human but a monster, and they didn't create the guild for humans. Estio then asked him if he had any evidence that the master was an enemy of humanity. Josemark said that His Holiness, Shuanan, told them. Estio asked if he was talking about the yellow dragon Shuanan, and Josemark said that recently, there's news from the eastern continent of a new pontiff being appointed, and people with quick sources of information already know. Estio realized he wasn't lying. Josemark added that, even though he hadn't officially entered the Holy Palace, he wondered how long the hesitant emperor would continue to hold Ignis's hand. Then, he expressed the hope that Estio would make a wise decision. The children descended from the tree, and Estio thanked them for preventing the ballista members from causing trouble. They inquired about Suki and gave her some affection, revealing in her eyes how much she enjoyed it. The children asked Estio why he didn't teach those guys a lesson. Estio explained that the village had rules against fighting, and Rian pointed out that they had provoked him first, suggesting he should have given them a little slap. Nervously, Rian asked if children could make requests. Estio clarified that there was no age restriction on requests, and Rian happily mentioned that he had heard Ballista doesn't accept requests from non-adults, so he hoped Ignis Guild would. Estio informed them that he was already working on a different request and suggested that if Rian wanted to make a request to the guild, he should go to the nearest guild branch. One of the kids mentioned he couldn't do something because people from Ranger Village weren't allowed outside the forest. Estio said there was nothing he could do, and the children thought he was heartless. Suki thought if he really was heartless, he wouldn't have kindly explained everything to them. One of the kids wanted Estio to listen and started talking about Rian's father in the capital, but Rian interrupted, saying it was pointless due to the rules they'd have to follow. His friend suggested asking nicely, but Rian angrily refused help from that kind of guild. Estio then looked into the past and saw Rian happily spending time with his father. Suddenly, soldiers came and forcibly took Rian's father away, separating him from Rian. Rian cried for his dad, but there was nothing he could do. Rian started running away, and the children followed, but Estio just watched them run. Night fell, and Estio returned to his room. He approached Kai and inquired about whether their guild was designed to cause harm to humans. Kai found the question quite significant, making her hesitant to respond. Despite the awkwardness, Estio politely pressed for an answer. Kai assured him that the guild had no intentions of causing harm to anyone. Estio, however, mentioned that he had heard a different story from someone else, and was merely trying to discern the truth between Kai and Shuanan. He believed he could determine the truth himself but wanted to hear Kai's perspective firsthand. This implied that if someone was lying, it must be the yellow dragon, Shuanan. Kai stood with tight fists, expressing regret. She admitted there was something she hadn't shared before. She revealed that, initially, she had planned to deceive him, but eventually, she tried to use him. Long ago, when the guild was established, people with special abilities, like herself, faced severe persecution. That's why the guild aimed to provide a safe haven for ability users. Both the guild and ability users desired a society where they could live peacefully. However, over time, the situation changed, and ability users were no longer ostracized. The emperor even allied with the guild. Kai continued, mentioning that during this period, she encountered Shuanan, the yellow dragon. Shuanan harbored strong resentment toward Roaran, the black dragon, who loved humans. Despite Roaran's persistence in caring for humanity, Shuanan vowed never to forgive him. Kai then informed Estio that he was related to the black dragon. She recounted how she came to believe that only a dragon could harm or kill another dragon until its new death. This belief led her to think that Shuvanan survived after defeating Roarin. After the commotion had settled, Kai searched for them, only to find that Shuvanan had vanished without a trace. This certainty made her suspect that he was up to something. Consequently, she traveled across the world in pursuit of him, eventually locating him on the distant eastern continent, far from the Empire. Kai mentioned that he used to have more control, but now Shuvanan has taken the pontiff position and is showing hostility towards the Ignis Guild. He feared that Shuvanan might bring about the destruction of the world. While searching for the yellow dragon, Estio found Kai. Worried that Kai might develop a hatred for humans like the yellow dragon, Estio tried to stay close to him. Estio asked Kai if it was wrong to hold hatred and if she ever considered Shuhanan's perspective. Kai thought it was impossible for her to understand because she couldn't read hearts like him. Estio suggested she could still try to guess, as Shuhanan might have felt hostility from her initially. Estio confessed that he used to dislike people who didn't like him. Kai thought about Shuhanan's anger and authority, realizing it couldn't be ignored. Feeling it might be too late, Kai suggested they take a break. Estio thanked her for sharing the story without hiding anything. When she asked if he got upset, Estio mentioned he already knew, even if she hadn't said it. She agreed, wished him a good night, and left. The next day, Parker started practicing his skills by running and flying. He assured everyone he was fine and encouraged them to continue. Shortly after, the children from the forest appeared, leaving Estio and his team confused. Parker tried to stop them, but they entered and lined up in front of Estio. When asked if they were waiting for him, one of the boys explained they had arrived and waited since sunrise. The other child pleaded with Estio to accept Rian's request. Estio mentioned that they needed to submit the request, but the children explained once more that they couldn't leave the forest. A few moments later, Rian arrived and stated that it was okay if Estio declined due to a prior request. The other two kids gazed at Estio with hopeful eyes and asked politely if he could help them later. One of them started crying, expressing that if the Ignis Guild left without assisting them, they didn't know how long they'd have to wait until they encountered another guild member. In response, Estio decided to revisit Rian's memories. In one memory, Rian's dad brought home a bear he had killed. Rian proudly declared to his dad that he had become the best ranger in the village. His dad responded, affirming that he would undoubtedly become an excellent ranger. Both of them would then boast about it to Rian's mom in heaven. Estio knelt down and told Rian that he had heard he didn't need help from the guild the day before. He asked Rian to share what he wanted Estio to do. Rian began to cry and expressed his desire to personally search for his father by leaving the forest. However, he was uncertain about what to do outside, realizing there was little he could accomplish on his own. Despite his tears, Rian pleaded with Estio to go to the capital, find his dad, and return to let him know how his father was doing, at the very least. Estio mentioned that he couldn't simply agree to the request. Instead, he decided to personally investigate information about his father. The boy happily revealed that his father's name was Isaac. When Estio was questioned about the cost, he clarified that no payment was necessary since it wasn't a formal request. The boy pledged to wait in the forest for Estio and inquired about Estio's name, to which he replied, Estio, in a friendly manner. They continued their journey to the Ruberizen Empire to meet Princess Marissa. Ahura commented on the hot weather, and Parker explained that it was summer, causing him to naturally wake up early due to the heat. Ahura expressed a desire for winter to arrive sooner. Parker questioned this, considering Ahura's desert background, suggesting he might prefer hot weather. Ahura playfully retorted, proposing that, following a similar logic, as a bird, Parker should prefer eating bugs instead of real food. Parker responded with frustration, making it clear he wasn't a bird but an avian. Despite the tension, they continued their argument. Kai inquired whether Ahura harbored hatred towards Parker, but Estio clarified that Ahura's aggressive speech was just his usual way of talking. Kai observed Estio, thinking about how different he was from Shuanan, who seemed to live for anger and hatred. Curious, Kai asked Estio why he accepted the children's request. Estio corrected her, saying he didn't accept it outright but listened to what they had to say. Kai recalled the dragon's reputation for keeping promises. Estio explained that since they were already headed to the capital and the request wasn't too difficult, he decided to help. Suki pointed out that Estio wasn't as cold-hearted as he might seem. Parker then shared a story about working hard for his boss, Estio, and aiming to obtain a blue Pegasus that year. When Estio asked about the blue Pegasus, Parker described it as a winged horse known for its speed and strength. He added that the creature was attracted to sparkly gems, making them tricky to handle in his hometown. Many avians dreamed of riding Pegasi and unicorns. Estio wondered about his wings, asking Parker if avians could also ride such majestic creatures. Parker responded, comparing it to humans having legs but still using carriages. Estio then inquired about the difference between Pegasus and unicorn. Parker, well versed in the topic, explained that while they were the same species, unicorns were female. Instead of wings, they possessed a healing horn. On the other hand, Pegasi were male and adorned with huge wings. As they strolled, Parker envisioned silver armor on the blue fur of a Pegasus. The conversation continued until they neared the capital, Ellie. Parker excitedly invited everyone to admire the beautiful city. Ellie was adorned with various buildings, houses, and castles, each boasting different colored roofs and walls. Parker pointed out the Rubarizen Palace in the distance, explaining its significance. Nijis marveled at the city's beauty, likening it more to an art piece than a town. Ahura had asked Niju if she knew what an art piece was. Niju, speaking quite fluently, explained that an art piece is something that holds beauty. She expressed how she felt the city looked very, very beautiful as she gazed at it. Niju then shifted her gaze to the ground, and with sadness in her eyes she asked if she could go there too. Ahuru inquired why not, and Niju shared that to other people, she's considered to be dirty. Perhaps recalling Jan's mean words, she mentioned that she's quite big and has a lot of fur. Estio asked if Yun Bairang's words were bothering her, and Niju confirmed that they were. She had a flashback of Yun stating that it was a mistake to treat beings like her as allies in the first place. Niju thought Yun might be right because most people harbor a dislike for creatures like her. She then questioned if it was okay for someone like her to stay by Estio's side. Estio clenched his fist and apologized for Niju having to hear those words from Yun. Niju further explained that she's worried people might attack Estio again because of her. She mentioned that the capital would have many more people than the other towns, and in that case, she wouldn't go in but would wait outside. Estio placed his hand on her shoulder and told her she didn't have to do that. Niju mentioned that she disliked people who said negative things. Estio then glanced at her and warned that he would become upset if he heard such things again. He promised to stand up against anyone who caused trouble, so there was no need to hide from anyone's judgment. Niju nodded in agreement, and Ahuru chimed in, saying that if someone said anything, he would personally deal with them. Life in Ellie's city was quite interesting. People had modern vehicles, although they were still pulled by humans. They engaged in the buying and selling of birds and traded various goods. Upon reaching the city gates, the guard inquired about their origin. Estio mentioned they were from the Ignis Guild, and the guard requested their identification before allowing them entry. Ahuru remarked that something smelled delightful. Estio and the rest of the group couldn't notice the scent, but after Ahura pointed it out, he speculated that it might be the fragrance of divine power. Kai had mentioned that it had to be the portal connecting to the Holy Palace. Parker was amazed by Ahura's ability to sense divine power, but Ahuru admitted he didn't even know he could do it. Parker explained that Ahura's power was remarkable because only chosen priests could usually feel divine power. Additionally, plants thrived in holy places and withered in impure ones. This led to the theory that plants were the first to detect divine power. Ahura considered it just a theory, but Parker pointed out that communicating with plants was usually impossible for humans and other creatures. Kai suggested they take a break since they had a few days before the deadline. When Estio asked why, she mentioned it would be best to delay contact so they could regroup with their combat force. Estio then recalled his promise to Mubian Hygar that he would call him when needed. Kai asked Parker if he knew the location of the Ellie branch of the Ignis Guild, and Parker confirmed he was familiar with it because he visited the place annually for deliveries. She instructed Parker to take care of what he needed to do, then left, mentioning that she needed to meet someone in the Ignis Guild building of the Ellie branch. Estio informed Parker that he had heard about a separate team in the guild that managed information. Parker had a realization as he spoke about Rian's father. Quickly deciding to assist, he rushed up the stairs and instructed Estio to wait until he called the information team. Ahura then signaled Niju to come closer, revealing that he had something to share. She approached, curious, and he disclosed a peculiar fact: every time a pigeon flaps its wings, 100 lice fall off. Estio, however, interrupted with a warning, suggesting that such jokes could lead to him being hated. Ahuru apologized, but Estio meant that he was talking about Parker hating him, not himself or the world. Choosing not to correct the misunderstanding, Estio reflected that his words should have been specific. Finally, Parker arrived with a member of the information team. She introduced herself as Skylar Teef, the team leader of the high-ranking information management department. She expressed her honor in meeting the leader. As they sat down, Estio conveyed that he was searching for two things. Skylar provided a form for him to fill out, detailing the characteristics of the person he sought. As Estio filled out the form, Parker wondered how he knew so much when Rian had only given the person's name. Suddenly, the ballista team burst into the office, slamming the door behind them. The receptionist had asked if Jose Mark needed any help. Angrily, he slammed his fist on the table and stated that he came to make a request. The receptionist apologized and explained that the Ignis Guild doesn't exchange requests with other guilds. Despite their rude behavior, they all started yelling, offering to pay money, and putting up a request. Estio, however, didn't sense any malicious intent from them. The receptionist tried to clarify that they couldn't accept requests from members of other guilds. Jose Mark insisted their necks were on the line, and demanded his master be brought immediately. As the receptionist started feeling scared, everyone in the office heard someone listing rule violations like property damage and obstruction of business. Then, Yun entered the office. She stated that according to union rules, when another guild member enters the guild's branch building, it's considered a provocation. Yun drew her knife and threw it at Jose Mark. Just as it was about to hit him, Estio appeared in front of him, putting his life in danger. Yun quickly changed the knife's trajectory with her hand, making it hit the floor. She called Estio a brat and questioned why he intervened. Joe's Mark, looking at the knife on the floor, realized Yun was a battle mage. Yun asked Estio if he followed her, but he explained that she had tried to kill a man for no good reason. She argued that they were intruders from another guild, but Estio suggested they could have been quietly sent away. Yun responded, saying that getting rid of them would shut them up faster. Estio questioned if they truly deserved death for their actions. Yun argued that they were like trash, and that someone needed to step up to clean up. She then teased Estio, calling him a scaredy cat, but offered to handle it herself. Jose Mark, feeling uneasy, complained about the guild's terrible customer service, and his friends agreed, expressing a desire to leave. In response, Yun placed her sword against Joe's Mark's throat. Estio intervened, urging her to lower her weapon. In a fit of rage, Yun accused Estio of daring to command her, but then, mysteriously, her sword flew out of her hand. Puzzled, she looked at her sword and then at Estio, grabbing his robe and demanding an explanation. Yun realized Estio's ability was more than just reading minds, stating that he wasn't human. Niju warned Estio to watch out, and suddenly, someone swung a sword at Yun's arm, narrowly missing. Yun, frightened, looked at Estio in terror. Nubian suggested stopping at that point, addressing Yun as a bold lady. Bro attempted to chop off her arm when she touched Estio. Nubian then hugged Estio and warned that if anyone harmed him even a bit, he would get very mad. Angrily, he stared at Yun and warned her that she wouldn't like him when he was angry. Yun gripped her sword, realizing he approached unnoticed. She inquired about Nubian's identity, and he explained he was just a combat member of the leader's support team. However, it was only temporary. When she questioned why Mubian was helping Estio, given that he's considered a monster, Mubian replied that she attacked him because he possesses a different ability. He then questioned why she didn't attack Parker, pointing at the winged gentleman, suggesting it was because he didn't look like a normal human. Parker quickly clarified that he is indeed human but appears a bit different. Mubian shifted focus to Niju and wondered if Yun would only kill half of her since she got both white monkey and human blood. Mubian explained that the world is more diverse than Yun might think, emphasizing that being stuck in one's ways hinders the ability to see the unbelievable things that exist. Yun got angry and then just turned and started walking away. Mubian hugged Estio again and said that he didn't know what just happened, but it seemed like it settled for the time being. Estio thanked him for the help, and then turned to Jose Mark and asked what he had come for. Jose Mark nervously explained that the Ballista Guild was in danger of being disbanded. He shared that they had fallen victim to a recent trend of scam gambling requests, and now they were facing financial troubles. The gambling request, a scam targeting smaller guilds, involved making a huge request with large rewards. If the guild couldn't complete it, they were charged a cancellation fee. Estio asked if they accepted the request without knowing it would be dangerous, and Jose Mark admitted they were aware of the risks but couldn't resist the tempting reward. Now, they had just learned that the guild master had failed the request after returning to the capital. Jose Mark then expressed that there was no point discussing the problem with a newcomer like Estio, said his goodbyes, and left outside. Mubian had asked Estio why he hadn't mentioned being the guild leader, and Estio explained that he didn't want to interfere with their situation. Mubian then explained that he had work to do and would be leaving his station for a bit. Feeling that time was of the essence, he approached Estio in one go. Parker, knowing that Estio used many portals for travel, panicked and suggested he take a rest and get his health checked out. Skylar arrived and, adjusting to Estio, suggested they continue their conversation at another location. She then showed him the stairs and instructed him to come that way. Estio told Niju to return with Parker and wait for him. Ahura asked if Estio wasn't taking him too, and when Estio confirmed he wasn't, Ahura was like, "Bro." Estio explained that he wouldn't take him because it would be quite boring. Ahura told him to come back fast, and Estio nodded and smiled at Ahura. They entered a large library in Mubian and asked if he could eavesdrop on their conversation. Estio said he could, and as he sat in his chair, he quickly expressed his desire to research Shuanan. Estio added that he had heard Shuanan lived in the eastern continent, and there were rumors that he might become the next pontiff. The lady mentioned that Shuanan was already a person of interest and handed him the latest report updated that day. She said she would give him the entire report, and instead of returning it after reading it, he should just burn it. She explained that although they weren't entirely certain, Shuanan might intend to contact the guild soon. The Ballista Guild claimed they were under threat of disbandment, and the Ignis Guild believed that the person behind the gambling requests absorbing disbanded guilds to increase their power was actually Shuanan, the Yellow Dragon. In the worst-case scenario, if his goal was to destroy the Ignis Guild, it could lead to war. They concluded their conversation in Mubian. Regarding Shuanan, Estio commented that he was just a dragon. Mubian asked if he was joking, to which Estio said he wasn't, though he avoided explaining further. Mubian thought to himself that it was not surprising there was another dragon, considering the existence of the Black Dragon, but the timing seemed too coincidental. Estio then mentioned that he heard the Yellow Dragon despises the Black Dragon, and the reason he is targeting the guild might be because of him. Mubian asked if Estio was considering leaving the guild, and Estio said he hadn't made a decision yet. Mubian questioned if leaving the guild would solve the problem with the Yellow Dragon, and Estio replied that it would at least remove the reason to start a war. It was evident that Estio wanted to stay in the guild but was unable to do so because of the Yellow Dragon. Mubian knelt down and asked Estio to direct him and share what he wanted him to do. Estio, feeling nervous, explained that he wasn't asking for a favor, they simply needed a team member for combat. He mentioned Shuhanan because he recalled Mubian's interest in finding dragon traces. Mubian gazed into Estio's eyes and reassured him that the dragon traces he sought had already been discovered. The day after, Kai encountered Mubian. He got upset because she addressed him casually. Kai explained she did it intentionally, knowing he preferred to keep his identity hidden. Mubian, displaying his knowledge, assured her that she could do as she pleased in the building, emphasizing it was hers. Despite the dolls appearing vigilant, he acted unaware and suggested calling her guild master. Although Kai wasn't thrilled, she allowed him to call her Kai. In return, he proposed being called Yubien. Estio and Niji joined them, welcoming Kai back. However, when Kai noticed Estio's hand, she inquired if he had given more of his blood to Ahuru. Estio confirmed, mentioning that Ahuru had stopped drinking water. Kai then suggested meeting the requester. A few minutes later, they found themselves in the streets. Parker asked Mubian if it was acceptable for him to meet the requester. Mubian, indifferent, mentioned there was only one person he didn't want to encounter in the capital. He clarified he held no hostility toward other royalty and the requester, who probably didn't recognize his face. Upon arriving, they saw a lovely house adorned with flowers. The bell rang, and they entered the house. Inside, they discovered a lovely lady named Lantana with beautiful green hair from Evergreen Hills Flower Shop. She promptly asked what kind of flowers they were seeking. Estio explained they were searching for the crystal flower, and requested her guidance to the hill where it bloomed. Lantana inquired about their invitation, and Estio showed it on his hand. Lantana confirmed it, and suggested they wait a bit. She told Estio's group to wait in a room, and as they passed by the employees, Estio noticed that they were soldiers. In another room, Lantana prepared some tea. When she returned, she offered them locust tea, known to clear thoughts with its mint-like flavor, ensuring they stayed alert. Parker found the scent too strong, but Lantana reassured him that it was invigorating. Estio, on the other hand, took a sip and surprised Lantana by handling it well. He mentioned knowing a candy with a similar flavor. Yep, Hawk's Candies. Lady Lantana got really excited when she heard him talking about the well-known wave-flavored candy. She said it was a specialty product of Delphia. She grabbed Estio's hand, expressing how glad she was to meet him. According to her, it's hard to find people who know about this unique candy flavor. Then, Mubian stood up and got serious, telling Lady Lantana to get to the point. She apologized, bowed, and introduced herself as Lantana. She added that the first imperial princess, Marissa, could not leave the palace. So, she made the request on her behalf. Lantana explained to Estio that the imperial princess, when questioning three people, needs him to determine if they are telling the truth or not. When Estio asked what would happen to those people after he confirmed them, Lantana explained that if they tell the truth, they'll receive appropriate treatment. However, if they lie in front of the imperial family, they'll be executed by beheading. Estio would not be exempt from this either. After a menacing look and a brutal answer, Lantana smiled and started playing with her hair while everyone else remained silent. Mubian realized that Estio would just be used as a political tool and that the rumor of her being a righteous princess was just a rumor. Estio accepted the request, shocking Mubian with his answer. Lantana expressed that she thought he would hesitate a little, finding it unexpected to see someone with no fear. Estio asked if he should be scared, and Lady Lantana told him to be serious in his decision. She came close to him and asked if he had the confidence to fulfill the request without upsetting the imperial princess. Estio then asked if she was asking that question as the imperial princess. He looked at her and addressed Lantana as the first imperial princess Marissa, suggesting that he knew she was the imperial princess all along. Now we see her shocked upon. That concludes part 3 of this recap. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. What will happen next? If you would like to see a part 4 of this manhwa, let us know in the comments section below. Till next time.